Hola. Hello everyone. ¿Podría encender el audio, por favor? Good morning everyone. Thank you for coming again. Now we are starting our keynote, which is made by Professor Hernán Astudillo. He is Professor of Informatics at the Universidad Técnica Federico Santa María in Chile. He is Senior Researcher at the Institute of Technology and Innovation in Health and Wellness of the Universidad Andrés Bello in Viña del Mar. He is Associate Researcher in Valparaíso. He is Informatics Engineer, and he holds a PhD in Information and Computer Science, and has been a Senior Application Architect at ICAI, which is System House and Financial Systems Architect, and a lot of more things. I would like to invite you to check his profile because it's a very, very important profile. So, in addition, Hernán was a jury member of my PhD dissertation, so for me it's a really big pleasure to have Hernán here. So thank you so much, Hernán, for accepting the invitation, and please, let's continue with your keynote. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hector. First of all, thanks for the kind invitation. This is it's very nice to be here finally. I always send papers, but I never get to present them, so I send my students. This is a good thing to be here in person. And yeah, we've been doing this since Hector was, both of us were younger, even younger than now, if I can say so. So I'll be talking today about several things that cross our topic. The main thing is microservice security smells, and I will also sprinkle a bit of refactorings and trade-offs, but I will also be talking what's probably even more important for some people, how we study these things. Not just the knowledge that we build, but how we go around doing it. And that's me, yeah, so that's everything is already said. And I'll be doing an overview of some past work, some ongoing, and even some future work. I will show you a couple of things we want to do. Most of what's presented here is ongoing collaboration with the University of Pisa, where Francisco he's doing his PhD with me, and he's doing his research internships there. And there we work with Soldani and Brogi, and we have done earlier work with other colleagues, and some of their content is splattered around these slides as well. So first of all, let's start about security. We all know what security is, so I can still keep this. So why put it there? I'm sure you know, and if you don't, this is something that we computer science people don't tell anybody, but we know it, is that most software that's built is never used. I don't say it. Consultants, industry say it. And that's probably very true. If one thing I do in my university, I ask my students, and I probably can ask you the same, but unfortunately, whether they are using the automatic calendar generation feature in the registration system. All students always say no. One of them once said, I do. Well, that feature's been there for years. Nobody knows it. So nobody uses it. Who cares? You know Equifax? Very famous, largest in the world company keeping your private data and selling. It's one of the 3 largest in the US. They were hacked about 6 years ago because they had some old software that was running on some old platform, and it hadn't been maintained because nobody was using it. So something as basic. In practice, robbers come through unused doors. So that door is not in use anymore, so nobody's locked it, and so that's what they break in. And I know physical places. In fact, we were robbed once because they came through an old door that was like locked because nobody was going to use it. We're talking about this because we're talking about security, and so security is not having the best firewall. Security is, and safety, which in Spanish is the same word, seguridad, yeah, which is unfortunate. But security, in this case, which is about preserving assets, it's not about technology. It's about decisions, like all software engineering. So the problem that we're concerned with, we've been concerned for the last, I don't know, decade and a half, is building secure software systems, systematically building secure software systems that can withstand attacks and that can exhibit certain properties. And there is vocabulary of threats, and there is research on that, and there's conference and so on. And there are two very famous approaches, none of which I will touch here now, but we have done research on. Patterns, security patterns, it's a great book if you want to look at it. Eduardo Fernandez, who recently retired, he was in Florida, he's now in Boston. It's a great book. And tactics, security tactics, which is an idea that was championed by Software Engineering Institute, and it's probably best published in, I think, in the second version of the Bas Clement Kasman book, which is a textbook of software architecture. The main textbook, of software architecture, in the second edition. 2006, I think, and it's been recently kind of updated. So why do we do this? We say we are building secure systems because we want to provide systems that provide these four things. And this will keep coming back to us during the next, how long? 40 minutes? ¿Cuánto tiempo tengo? 37 minutos.
Yeah, more or less. We have 45 more minutes. We can allow 50 minutes for...
Half an hour then, okay. So, the goals that we'll put ourselves, and I'll call them goals, objectives in this slide, and then I will, oh, there's a typo there, but anyway. First of all, confidentiality, then integrity and availability. La CIA, that's la CIA, right? So security is CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, CIA, like some famous intelligence agency. And this is, it's a 60s joke, but it still works. Plus accountability and non-repudiation and quite a few other things. And we're not talking about safety here, only security. Now, I will say something I didn't put in these slides because I don't dare, but is that my area is software architecture, and I work as an architect, and I do research in software architecture. And to me, as an architect, security doesn't exist. Not because it's very hard to achieve, because it's a useless word. So if you tell me, I want my system to be very fast, high performance, I know what to do. I just have to cut corners and make it very fast. I want my system very scalable. Of course I want to do. I want it very, very safe. What is that? You want it very, nobody can get information from inside. Nobody can modify it. It's always available. They're totally different things. The techniques are completely different, and usually the ones that make it very confidentially probably affect the availability, as we will see. So security as a word, as a requirement, is totally useless to me. But those 3, 4, and in other formulations, more words are very useful. So how do we operationalize this usefulness? Well, we could always go to the ISO norm, as a standard, which maybe we probably teach in our software engineering courses and so on. And this is the ISO 25010, successor of the famous 9126. That's widely used, even though it's 20-year obsolete by now. No, 12-year obsolete. So we got this list of 31 things, plus conformance. So we could measure, we could measure 31 things in the software. So let's figure this out. You are working, you are building, some customer calls you, I want to build a system that's I want it very, very secure and very fast and whatever. So do you really measure 31 things? Does anybody who actually writes software to eat every day measure 31 things of what they write? Not even we do it. So, okay, something more important, some other. Which should I measure? Or more importantly, what do I do with that? I mean, what do I care? So we could take security patterns and we could do it that way in a certain kind of way in solutions. We could do tactics, which is my favorite abstraction, and we could tell them, look, if you want to detect attacks, you can do it some way or this or that, and you can resist this way, you get to pick one, but which are the advantages? Which are the disadvantages? Where do I apply this? This is kind of vague, isn't it? So you have to make this useful. Well, I will introduce one more word. Bad smells. It's appropriate. I didn't ask for it, but it's very appropriate. That's a good smell. That's a good smell. If you are looking, if you go to website and it asks you to change your password. This happened to me 3 weeks ago. So my password was, of course, Hernan with lowercase. Well, actually it was Hernan123, but let's change that. So I had to change it. So I, being a computer scientist, I said, well, I will change the uppercase, the initial uppercase. Because, you know, this is string comparison and it's different. And if you do the hash, it's completely different. The system said, this is no joking, you cannot use the same password. This doesn't happen to you in your daily life.
Sometimes.
But you use Unix, you use Linux.
Yeah, but in some systems, for example, I receive a message like you have used previously the new password, so you have to get a new.
But yeah, but you get a hash and it compares the hash. In this case, I just changed the letter, lowercase h to uppercase h, and it realized it was the same. Why? Because click is comparing the strings. The passwords are stored in clear text, number one. Number two, they are being compared in a Windows machine. Not the usual string comparison in C, but they are being compared with Windows, which uppercase and lowercase is the same thing. So if you have your money in that bank, you say, well, okay, who cares? Or do you worry a little bit? That's a bad smell. It's a symptom of a bad decision. So it's nothing wrong with realizing that the password is the same. It's just that this shouldn't be happening. And I know about security a little bit, and I know that this means that somewhere down there, one, they are keeping passwords in clear text. Two, they are storing, comparing them. So this is a very bad decision down there. Well, that's a bad smell. It's a symptom of a bad decision. So this is a concept that's not new. I was introduced to you in 2009, in fact, in a project where my lead developer asked me to, we were introducing that, but it's not that much used in academia, since only from the last maybe 7 years. So although some authors talk about bad decisions by themselves, I prefer to identify symptoms of bad decisions. For example, centralized authorization. That's a typical one. You look at the design and you realize that there is a piece, typically there is a pattern actually, the gateway, that says handle all your access and authentication at the gateway. So that means that in practice, there is somebody at the entrance of the campus checking our IDs, and once that somebody is inside, they can go wherever they want. Even the president rector's office, which is right there. But the solution of that, of course, is to be trust no one and put, for example, zero trust, right? And to put a guard or a lock in every door, which is extremely inefficient. Yeah, but the solution. So there is something that we may want to look at it because it's affecting one of the properties that we said, authentication. How do we know that the person coming through the president's office door is actually somebody authorized to be here? How do we know they didn't jump through that back wall? So what do? We decided to study multi-literature, what's actually written. Now, one thing I say, and it's also put at the end of the slides, but it's very important, is that my field is software engineering. Yeah, and so if you think of object-oriented programming or, I don't know, microservices or any of these things, none of those things were invented in academia. Software engineering happens out there, where people are building code to eat every day, in the wild, that's how they call it. That's where software engineering is really happening. What do? We understand what they're doing. If we're lucky, we get PhD students who have also industrial experience. And we gather, study, and here we show a couple of studies, systematize what they're doing. We teach them to our students, so when they go out, they know what's happening. When I studied software engineering, some years ago, that was last century actually, it was expected that when you finish your degree, you went to work for a company, and the company taught you what was necessary. University only taught you abstract, powerful concepts. So I knew how to solve Laplace equations and things like that. I had no idea how to actually build software. That doesn't happen today. That's not acceptable today. I presume that Ecuador is not very different from Chile in that sense. Students now, in third, fourth year, they know how to build software. Maybe they don't have much experience. They can charge too much. But they know the iterative incrementals. They know how to build the technology. They know what a microservice is. Because now, of course, hardware is much cheaper than then. So we are talking about this because we want to know what's going on there. So there is a kind of study called multivocal review. A systematic review is a kind of experimental study technique that's used with literature. And this is an extension. This is published. I will show you later. So what do we do here? We, first of all, try to understand what the microservices are doing. I didn't define microservices. I presume some familiarity. Essentially, they're small programs. Yeah, there are small programs, typically in the cloud. There are methodological implications. Usually, they are developed by systems as delivery units. Sorry, by teams. Yeah, so teams build and deploy services, and it's a solution for high availability and scalability and so on, because if I have this, I can have many. So we get here, and we get ports, and they're connected, blah, blah, blah. So we want to figure out, well, I will click that ocultar, so we can see what's going on here. There we go. Yeah, and you can look at that book, and it's a good description. That Diaz over there is not Portuguese, he's from Goa. You know, what used to be the Portuguese part of India. And well, if we get a security smell, we ask people, how do you work around this? Because if you get security, specifically security in this research, smells, then we know what to address perhaps. So we formulated in this particular study, I will show you later some earlier and later work, 2 research questions. One, which smells are there for microservice-based applications? Yeah, so if you have a microservice system, which things are you looking for? You could teach to somebody who's new, or you could try to automate. And second, here comes another word. How do you refactor, how do you modify these applications to mitigate those smells? So for example, if the security smell here is there is only one guy at the main door, and we really don't know what happens inside, one mitigation is to put a guard at every door, which is a perfectly valid solution, and of course will bust the budget, right? Second, maybe we can put these finger readers at every door. So the problem, of course, is that if my finger is not enrolled at the entrance, I'll be able to go nowhere. Then I will have to set up a registration system. So when I come in, if I'm not registered, my finger gets registered while there are 57 people behind me trying to get in. Trade-offs. Some things are giving high security, and some, but there are a lot of problems. You have to give low security and very easy. But there are solutions. Well, what are people actually doing? So we did this study, and we are still doing it, by the way. You can still participate in it. We did some search, not just literature, but also gray literature, meaning white papers and blogs and all kind of things where you have an author and a date. We found 6,000. We filtered, we got 136 pieces of literature. We selected them to be mainly primary, etc., 58 and so on, and then we analyzed them. So what do we do? This is a summary, a graphical summary. We conducted a multivocal review of the white and gray literature. White literature is what we write and is peer reviewed. Gray is typically non-peer reviewed. Identified, look at that. We identified the smells to security properties of one given standard. So this smell sounds like. This is authentication. This is authorization. We identify those with the refactorings, and then we generated taxonomy to connect them. Yeah, that's where we are researchers. That's pretty much the taxonomy. So in fact, we had tons of things in left side first. These are smells. You can probably read them, I hope, yes. It's not my best, largest font, but this is a typical one. Hard-coded secrets. The password is in hard code. I suppose that nobody does that anymore, right? No, nobody, no. Yeah, that's why it's one of the top 11 smells. It keeps happening. Okay, so hard-coded secret, you could be surprised, why don't they? Well, they don't. Actually, it's not because people are full. It's because people are lazy. No, sometimes there are very good reasons, actually. Yeah, like, for example, if you have a very tight delivery and you just have to give the software, put it out, you have no time to do things well, and that's a trade-off that creates technical debt. And if you record it and you manage it, it's fine, as long as you come back on Monday and you change that piece of software. So there is a problem, non-secure service to service, maybe inside the firewall they are communicating naively, and so on. So central authorization is the one I just talked about a few minutes ago. So, and we identified in the literature, looking at what they did, the solutions. But first, I have to, this slide looks nice, this figure. It took us maybe a month to get there, or maybe more. Why? Because there were tons, when you ask people things, they tell you in natural language. And we synthesize and group them in a few. How many here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The paper says 13. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, the other 3 are more generic. We had to discard them. We synthesize into this. And then, why this? Because we realized, and we sort in this way, because they map to CIA. All of these smells are talking about confidentiality. These smells are only relevant to authentication, not to integrity or confidentiality. So you can associate, in this field study, we're finding what people are talking about, and we can associate that to properties for which we have methodological robust solutions, like the tactics and patterns I showed a while ago. So I probably can look, and we did, look at if this is a problem of authentication, I can look an authentication book and take a look at these things. So having done that, on the right side are the refactorings, potential solutions. Refactoring is a word that's been widely misused. We are just using it to mean changing software, which is pretty much what most people use it today. That's not what it means. Yeah, Updike, 1996, defined refactoring as a modification of software, usually mostly mechanical, automatic, to modify the structure and keep the behavior. Yeah, he exemplified with 33 refactorings in Smalltalk. That was in 1996. 30 automatic and 3 that required some work. And then Fowler wrote a book called Refactoring and made the word famous. But today, refactoring is mostly used to pretty much mean any change, which is, unfortunately, somebody could, if somebody wants, we can collaborate making a study on the drift of the meaning of refactoring, how it's been changing in the papers in 1996 through 2023, what refactoring used to mean and what it means now. The drift of concepts, very, very, very interesting. It's just topic analysis plus some asteroids. So we get this and we ask them and figure it out there. So after that we look at the studies. And we figure that most of them do talk about, for example, non-secure service communications, and then access control and so on, and very few, for example, address these kind of things. This is a very common smell, which has also happened to me. Once I had to audit a project. So the best way to audit a project that's in trouble is to go for lunch with them. And so you buy beer and you have fun and they tell you how awful the project manager is and all those things. And how proud they are of their own collection code that they wrote themselves. I said, wait, you are not using the standard collection code? No, that's too big, too slow, we use our own. Have you certified it? No, that's not necessary, we know it, we did it. Okay, I said, big tick there, see, audit this guy. This happened, by the way. I'm going to audit this guy because he's building his own code, totally unverified, and of course, hopefully it works, but if something happens to him, that's the end of the component. So, yes, that's actually a true big smell, and it's not that much prevalent in the literature. So this is an example I showed a while ago. So what did we write? Oh, sorry, that's kind of small, but well. We define publicly accessible, and we associate them these two properties, and we gave some description and so on, sorry. And in this study, then, we discussed, this is not coming out well, there we go, the effect of the smells in detail, and we gave a snapshot. So we want to proceed the following one. What did we do then? Well, this is another study, which is another publication. We decide, well, as I just said, to solve a problem, I open another one. If I solve the security problem and put a guard in every door, that makes it pretty much uncomfortable. Yeah, probably many people will not want to come here. So, knowing that, we have to resolve it. Well, we get to introduce, I mentioned this, bad decisions. So we did a study in online surveys to analyze the impact, the possible impacts. And we identified of those 42 possible impacts, we did an online survey, still running, to identify, and of those, more people said yes, no, this not really. And we came up with impacts. So there is a beautiful drawing somewhere over here. No, well, I will get to it in a moment. So in this drawing, you can see what are the impacts. That's a big question mark. And it says here that should we use centralized authorization or should we use a decentralized? And it says that will affect confidentiality, integrity, authentication, resource utilization, testability, a lot of things. Where do those clouds come from? What do they mean? Well, clearly those are things to be done, but what do they mean? Well, let's look at this to get an idea. This figure, which this is a beautified version of a paper from a colleague at Puki Rio who did this for a hospital. This says, well, we want to make meeting schedules. We have to take two decisions: how we are going to collect the schedules of everyone, los horarios, and how we're going to choose when the meeting is. And this may affect some things. For example, if we choose manually, that is too many conflict, but it's good for manually. It makes people feel happy. Automatically, people feel less happy, but there are less conflicts. What does this mean? Let's suppose many of us, or perhaps all, certainly most of us, work at some university or similar, or we have meetings. Definitely, all of us have meetings. That's a given. All of us have meetings at some point. So if we have to have a meeting, all of us, and if we tell the system, Doodle, for example, right, which probably many of us use in some variation, the system will tell our schedules, and the system will find the perfect time for meeting, which is Friday, 7 p.m. Because nobody has meetings on Friday at 7 p.m. I'm pretty sure you don't, and if you do, you should have a good beer, and they will talk. So nobody has meetings, but it's in the schedule as open. So if Doodle were to choose automatically, of course there would be no conflict. Everybody can Friday 7 p.m. Of course there would be unhappiness. Nobody likes it. What do you do in practice? If everybody but Jimmy can on Tuesday 4 p.m., you take the phone and you call Jimmy. Jimmy, you know, everybody but you can on Thursday 4 p.m. No, but it's very important. But Jimmy, everybody but you know, just understand. Oh, come on, Jimmy, you're going to do that. It's, you know, we will have to meet on Friday at 7 p.m. Oh, okay, but only this time. And there you go. Doodle cannot do that. We could automate it and have Doodle write, "Dear Jimmy, please change your meeting of Thursday at 4 p.m. What would you do that with that message if you receive it? Probably going to be a polite answer, ¿no es cierto? Dear Doodle. So what does this mean? That there are trade-offs that can be documented. This is an illustration that comes from a book that's used in requirements engineering, and we just borrow this formalism just to show what's happening. These are hierarchies of decisions, and these are hierarchies of goals. These are called soft goals because they have non-hard conditions. So going back to our beautiful drawing, there we go. We were here, remember? We were on our online review. So how do they connect to each other? In other words, how do those two decisions, can I make a graph like that? So in the survey, we built 10 questions, if you can look at them. For example, it says, first one says, I'll show you, this is not online, but so just ignore me for a moment. The first one says, centralized authorization may deteriorate, may increase. May deteriorate analyzability, may improve modularity. So the stability, analyzability. So the words are like swapped around, but we are testing every decision for every quality attribute. And with that kind of poll, we get a result like this. So we can figure out what people are actually saying. Where we get a strong agreement, which is kind of not always, and there are some weak agreements. So for example, number 6, it says that 3 and 6 people are like, well, okay, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, 5 and 6 are there. So we can represent this. First result, not intended, but it came out well. There is little discrepancy between practitioners said in our survey and what researchers said. So we are not, as a community, we're not that far. We are more or less tracking what is happening out there. So we agree with the lion on the most delicious animals in the forest, right? So it's fine, we're doing well. And this is a summary. Here, only those links that are above 50% match are represented. You could be, if you are a qualitative researcher, you could object that. You could say, no, we should have, I don't know, we could be scoring 3 out of 5 and so on. But we are just engineers, so we just count and that's it. And we get this, and it says that using centralized authorization is very testable, which is true. We can always go to the door. Is there somebody at the main gate? No, why? Bingo. 1 second to know that our system is not working. Oh, yes, 1 second. But it's pretty much for everything else. It's not good for decentralization, which is a design. It's not good for a time behavior or for authentication. Whereas doing it decentralized, certainly it makes harder, because if we have this problem, then we have to test, is there somebody at that gate and the next and the door? So this is harder to test, a lot harder, not just slightly harder. But on the other hand, it's more modular, which means that if something happens here, it doesn't affect the whole system. It's failure isolation, and it's more authenticate, and it's more deployable, and it doesn't touch the other properties, at least according to our poll. You could argue that that doesn't mean anything, but we're talking about a poll among people who write software every day. You can still participate. If you want to take a picture of this thing is still on, or at least as of last week, it was still live, this site. So you could check it, and sorry, just lost your chance. But this is published here. So what do we do next? ¿Cómo estamos? ¿Cuánto me quedan? 20 minutos, 15, 17? 5 more minutes. Okay. Well, let's talk about trade-off. This is what we just did, right? Trade-off. We saw this? Yes, those are trade-offs. What should we do now? We should do an experiment. What I just told before is part of the PhD work of Francisco and some related work, earlier work done by Gaston and a few other colleagues, now colleagues. Well, what's an experiment? Well, what we should be able to do is to be able to see, well, we are going to set up this catalog of smells and their solutions, and we are going to have a class, a professional masters, for example, which I direct one. So half of students will receive a certain system and will be given this list of smells to check and to correct, and the other half will be given some other solution. That's an experiment. Why do we do this? Because in an experiment you can talk about causality, causalidad. So we identify typically a group, novices and experts, because experts usually know what to do independently of whether they have the tools or not. But typically, this kind of thing will be very useful for novices. But we want to check that. So we have 2 treatments, with and without smell, and we have at least 2 populations, novices and experts. So we get combinations that we start playing with. You get formulate hypotheses, and you get to test. In principle, all hypotheses are negative, right? But you just play around with that, and then test. But how do you compare? How do you know if the people who used your smells and your refactorings got better code than the other ones? How do you know that's because of that? First of all, how do you know that's better code? Because it has less lines? Because you tested it more? So usually, one does an expert review and builds what's called a ground truth. In other words, the expert, people who you believe are experts, solve the problem for you. And then you can compare the solution of your subjects with that truth. And the closer they are, the better the answer. So you do that, and this is a description for another experiment which we did comparing patterns and tactics, which is I talk in the 3rd slide. And you did that and evaluate, compare, and find out that in certain cases, really, apparently certain solutions don't matter. That doesn't make, it's not that terrible, whereas others, we do make a difference. Then you allocate time, train people, run an experiment, then teach again, apply it again, document thing, run your experiment in a week. apply the threats to comparisons, and then you get your results surveys. Then that's experimental design. Experimental design. Now, I realize that my talk here is making everybody very excited and sweaty, but I'll get done real fast. So summarizing, what have I done? First of all, let me talk about the study object, which is in the title, right? I said that I was going to talk about secure microservice security smells, and actually it was deceiving, right? But this is, since I that's there. Microservices are booming technology. I didn't even bother to explain it, but they are booming technology. Security is a growing problem. I didn't justify it because it's pretty much well known. In fact, right now in Chile, many public services are working slowly because there was a big ransomware attack in a provider. Bad smells are a relatively recent strategy to identify problems. Refactorings, in the new sense of systematically mapped change, can be applied to mitigate or hopefully solve these problems. And the trade-offs are an essential software engineering. I must know the trade-offs, as I did a few minutes ago. And what are the methodological highlights? Well, first of all, and this is the most important one in my opinion, software engineering happens out there. We are studying something that's happening out there. If we're also involved into development or consulting, of course, we're also out there, right? But in practice, software engineering is happening out there, which is, well, we have an international audience. In Latin America, usually academia and industry are totally separate. Not just separate, but looking different ways. Whereas, for example, in Central and Northern Europe, my colleagues in software architecture, their PhD students are financed by the local companies. Like, no, Siemens, BMW, Volvo, no, local companies. It's different realities. Yeah, different realities. But yeah, so I don't even, if you were talking there, I wouldn't have to say that. So, but software engineering and software architecture are happening out there. Multi-vocal reviews are a way of not just knowing the academic literature, but also the gray literature. Experimental studies, once we get some conjectures and some theories, we can propose and test causality, and we have done it for some cases. Usually you have to be very restricted, but we have done it for a few, and that's our next step in this with our next PhD student, because Francisco will graduate with what's already done here. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hernan. Very interesting talk. I really like this kind of topics because here we can realize that we get a lot of, let's say, mistakes when we develop new software and so on. So I would like to start with one question. And yeah, well, in this presentation we can see that we have smells everywhere, you know. And something important is that we are not aware about those smells, and for that reason they become smells. So my question is, how can we, let's say, design a strategy in order to try to avoid to get these smells when we are developing new software, where we are designing or creating new artifacts in these, let's say, areas like security engineering or software engineering?
Thanks. Well, I'll tackle first the first part. Yes, there are a lot of smells, as you say. You know, in this talk yesterday with this chocolate lady yesterday, if you were around, she said that our nose can detect 8,000 smells, our tongue 5,000. I cannot enumerate more than perhaps 12. Because cognitively, if I could really feel 8,000 smells, I would be nuts. Or divine, I don't know, whatever. Yeah. So I cannot. So what do? We just focus on a few, and usually the ones that come out very strong. So if this rose is very strong, pungent, I will feel it first, and so on. So that's a strategy that has worked out evolutively. We can do the same thing, to focus on what's important. For example, if you are building, I'm right now involved with in the Institute of Informatics for Health Informatics, as it says there, it is. And most of my experience before was with financial industry. In financial industry, what's important is integrity. That nobody goes into the bank account and change 0 for 100,000 and then runs to the ATM and takes $100,000, because once they take it out, they are gone. In health industry, it's not integrity, because rarely people go in and change a 1 for a 5 in a diabetes machine. What they do is they can look and they figure out, Jimmy has cancer. And if that comes out, Jimmy doesn't have a job, doesn't have insurance, and a lot of other consequences. Okay, and Jimmy can say whatever he wants, but his history for the financial system. So what's really important in financial systems is mostly integrity and some availability. And in the clinical world is confidentiality and availability if you're talking hardware. So that means that some smells are very important for some industries, and others less. You have to pick. You cannot solve everything, right? So that's why. Now, how do we pick them? In practice, what we have done is to ask people what they privilege, right? That's why these surveys. Now, if we were sophisticated, we would probably come out with a scheme to tell me where you work and I will tell you what to look at. We kind of go into that, and Francisco has developed a tool to analyze things. But for now, most we can say is that, look, people who work here worry about this. People who work here look about that. So currently that's more or less what we can say. And also, hanging from that, I mentioned just in passing technical debt, which is when you take a solution that's technically suboptimal, but you just have to. Yeah, and those generate smell. The relationship between smells and technical debt hasn't been it's not systematically clear yet. But there is a whole lot of things there, because there is work on how to recognize self-assessed or identified technical debt and to manage it with value and so on, but you have to go from smells, this is weird, to how much debt we have, to how do we manage it. That's a much bigger thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Someone would like to make questions? Any question for Hernan? Thank you, Flor.
Hi, very interesting presentation. You talk about a multivocal review. What is a special kind of review? In which case do you think it's important to use? You told me yesterday something about that. I want to learn.
There. Yeah, I put it there. You can look for multivocal review. Sorry. But you can Google us, maybe. Yeah, this is a Ponce Soldania Studio Brogi. And this is published in the Journal of System and Software, and was also presented at the ICAI International Conference of Architecture in March as a journal first. What a multivocal review is a systematic. I start a little back. A systematic literature review is something that's borrowed from medicine. In medicine, they usually say, well, Dr. so-and-so says that if you give them roses, they will cure their cancer. So you can make a chemical argument and so on, but if somebody proposes it, eventually you make a trial, and you make publications, and so they have developed techniques in medicine, salud pública realmente, epidemiología, to figure out if there are 157 studies that talk about the impact of the smells on health, they will be able to discard and so on. We borrow these techniques, software engineering community, starting in 2000 with Barry Kitchenham and so 96, Kitchenham. In Brazil, they are very active, mostly in Rio initially, but and so on. We come from offshore from that branch. and they develop systematic literature reviews. Okay, we have done that. So it's a way of gathering systematic literature, filtering and so on, sorting, extracting concepts. Mapping, extract literature, and review, extract the concepts and taxonomies. In fact, we just finished one on the relationship of, well, we'll talk about later, sorry. Well, with a multivocal review, you don't just involve papers, but also white papers, blog pages, and so on. But that's difficult because then how do you assess that it's not just Jimmy saying, hi, I don't like security smells. You cannot consider that, okay, so what, Jimmy? Thanks for your opinion, but which is very different from, well, I think that security smells are a very important consideration, and in practice, we here in Siemens, we do this and this and that. That's very interesting. We want to know that. So there is a much more work of filtering, of making sense of what's going on. But on the other hand, the payoff is larger because it's the unfiltered thing. It's what's happening before they come to do their PhD with us. So we are reading their minds. Well, no, they are reading their desks. What will maybe in 3 years motivate them to study with us, we are ahead. So it's more work, but it's more payoff. And but once you gather the studies, and then from the knowledge methodology, it's the same thing. You extract topics, align, identify, do taxonomy, relevance, and then you can, if it's a mixed method of studies, you can do a taxonomy and use this taxonomy to a survey to check that what you came out with makes sense. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. One more question?
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I have a question. You know, the software is evolving, so have you faced one case when you need to go back one change because you have some fulfillments, some requirements that were fulfilled with one change, but maybe in a regression test or something like that, in an iteration, you need to go back in some aspects of the quality that you mentioned? Yeah, that's the question. Have you faced that case?
Many times, many times. For different reasons. But we don't call it go back. We just call it go forward to correct a mistake. We never go back. And now, of course, we can do undo and so on, but the versioning system doesn't forgive and doesn't forget. So that's very important. Yes, that happens a lot. It just means that you realize that this idea of putting a guard in every door wasn't that smart after all. So maybe you decide that you are going to put guards in key doors, like the rector's office and here and there, and the other are going to be unguarded, which is backtracking a little bit. That happens a lot? Yeah, of course, happens a lot. But how do you address that? Well, in practice, when automating a driver, when I was studying software engineering, there was big faith in the tools. We just have to develop the proper techniques and tools, and people would use them, and there would be perfect software. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. Yeah, because as we all know, especially our young students, it's good, they know, we are in a profession where the easy things are already automated. People in my time were hired to build a system that could get averaged and so on, and maybe calculate salaries. Now, the business person does it with Excel. So all the easy things are automated already. If they hire you, it's going to be the difficult parts. So the requirements are always changing. Let's go to do with your question. Well, always going to be some change, maybe not back, but maybe a little bit, and it's because it's a trade-off. I realized that, yes, now it's very safe, but it's very inefficient. So maybe I want to move a little bit. Techniques like those trade-offs allow you to play and to explain in advance to the stakeholders, look, we can do this. We can put a guard in every door, but this will affect, I don't know, availability or cost and so on. Now, people do that in their heads all the time. Yeah, so we are just formalizing and systematizing that to build, hopefully, recommender systems. Yeah, to the kind of things. Recommender systems that work with imperfect, incomplete, saying, incomplete, unreliable, biased, and imprecise information, which is usually way. But people have to decide anyway. All of you are here, you didn't know what I was going to do, exactly going to do today. Would be better off having a coffee downstairs, having maybe 1 more hour at the hotel, but still you're here. You decided on imperfect information to come here. And we do that all the time, because we cannot expect until we get all the diapos and we know all the jokes he's going to say before, yeah, I think I'll go. No, but then it's over. So, yes, that will happen all the time. And the automatic techniques we have usually are not that good, are only good at enabling to document that you decide to change, and not why. And that's a totally different thing. That's explainability. That's a concept that's very hot in artificial intelligence, explainability, interpretability, observability in the microservice world. We're working on that too. We also have another line of work with there in explainable software architecture, where you should be able to explain, hopefully automatically, but why did this guy do this and then do this other thing? Because here we have this thing, and at that time, the balance seemed to trigger this, but when he got new information, he triggered that way, so he changed, and that's why we have an unguarded door. So that opens a whole new line. Thanks for the question.
Okay, thank you so much, Hernan, again. So, please, let's give an applause to Hernan. Very interesting talk, and as we can see, Hernan is a very important guy in this kind of topic, so I'm really proud to have this conversation right now. So, we are continuing with the conference. Now, I would like to invite you to check the program. So, we have now 2 sessions. Those sessions are Informatics and Healthcare Information Systems, and another session which is Enterprise Information Systems Applications and Learning Management Systems. Please, people who want to stay in the first session, you can stay here in this room, and people that want to attend the other session need to go to the room Aula Sorbona. Also, please, people who are online, please, well, if you want to stay in the first session, you can stay in this meeting Zoom room, but the other session you need to change the Zoom room. So let's continue with the conference, and thank you so much.